Welcome to the Big Me Kickoff. I am your host, Kevin Noon. It is Monday, July 31st, and college football season almost here. Award season has gotten underway at this point where we now know that two Buckeyes are on the Maxwell list, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk a little bit about college football expansion, and I got a couple other topics in mind. But uh, first off, I want to talk about who I'm joined by, Tony Gerdeman, Ketchup extraordinaire. Tony, how are you doing?
Doing pretty good, Kevin. Thank you for having me. It was an honor to receive the email saying, "Hey, are you bored? Do you have nothing else to do? Would you like to be on the show?" And I said
Well,
yes.
that's generally how these things come about. But been a lot of talk out there on social about college football expansion, realignment, however you want to put it, and we will get to that here in a minute. We already have a few questions about that. Additionally, Ohio State has been on a little bit of a heater in terms of recruiting. Chris Henry Jr., Aaron Scott, both have committed in the last couple of days. And we got one other topic that we've got in mind, but we know once we devolve to that one, it will take over the show. So we will save that one until the end. So, let's get to a couple of the comments as we get warmed up here. I want to say hello to Florida Buckeye as well as Mike Smith. Mike Smith has my number, and he was the one who texted me to alert me about some crazy things that had happened in terms of podcasts going up in the wrong time. I'm addressing that 900-pound gorilla right now, right now, because I don't want that one on my record. My permanent record is already rivals Bart Simpson's in terms of F-ups and everything else. But good to see you, Mike. Glad that you're able to join us, as well as Billy Tuesday, Brian DeGroff, Shane wanting to know who is hosting the show. Once again, it is myself, Kevin Noon, but I'm joined by Tony Gerdeman. So you can just pretend that Tony's doing it if you're not a Kevin Noon fan. Not that I would know why anybody wouldn't be a Kevin Noon fan. But let's kind of start talking a little bit about it as people start getting into the show and watching the numbers grow on here. Tony, let's start with what we know. And what we know is Colorado has agreed already to join the Big 12. And staying in that vein, it seems like Arizona seems set to be the other team to go. At this point, the Big 12 moving forward would like to be a 14-team league, which I'm not crazy about that number. I think 16 is better than 14. But then again, we've covered a Big 10 that's been at 14 for a long time. Is this a case of programs just jumping off of a sinking ship of the Pac-12? I mean, do they think that they're going to better themselves in the Big 12? I mean, what is your overall impression of the movement we've seen so far before we get into message board rumors about the transitions we could see moving forward?
Well, first, I'm just glad you gave me the number of the teams in the Big 12 at the moment, because I have no idea. It's a number. I think it changes daily, but I do know that there are people around the Arizona university and program that believe they are headed for the for the Big 12. So I would expect, like they do, for that to happen, and that continues to gain even more and more steam. Now, Arizona would put them at an even number, but it seems like they've been tied in. Arizona State, Colorado, Utah have all been tied in together because of the four corners there. And so can you just bring in Colorado and Arizona and leave it there? Or do you bring in Arizona State, Utah, and then does that leave you? Is that an even number, Kevin? I'm not able to keep up.
I believe so. I mean, if you bring in Arizona, would put them at an even number because of the departures of Texas and Oklahoma. It would get them to the even number because you're looking to replace Texas and Oklahoma. They've replaced one of those with Colorado, so the addition of one would be there. But I wouldn't say that the door is completely closed of them adding 3 and just going to 16. I mean, we're dealing with a huge game of liar's poker here, and I don't think anybody's truly being forthcoming with what their plans are. And even more so above that, what your plans are at 8 a.m. may not be what your plans are at 11 a.m. because things are constantly changing and evolving. And truth be told, if you wait, you may be too late.
Well, and we've seen over the years that you mentioned the secrecy of this. Like when the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Pac-12, or back when just the Big Ten and the Pac-12 had their thing, and there was some, shenanigans going on there. Then you had the alliance, and all the while you still had USC and UCLA looking to leave, and the Big Ten dealing with them, and the Colorado side saying everybody's set in the Pac-12. Pac-12 thinks everybody's set, and then 3 days later or something, Colorado's like, we're out of here. Just the amount of people who are supposed to know what's going on, meaning the leaders of conferences and the leaders of other institutions who are completely out of the loop, has to be a helpless feeling, for one. And then as you are feeling so helpless, you've got to start reaching for your own lifelines. And so now you've got a wave of panic going on. And not that really, like Colorado, Arizona State, Utah are these big power players, but if you remove them, you're basically left with Oregon and Washington and like Cal and Stanford as anything. And Cal and Stanford don't do anything ratings wise. There's no interest there. What will Washington and Oregon do to find a better situation? And does the Big 12 reach out to them, or do they try to strike a deal? And this, I still don't know how. Obviously, they would love to join the Big 10, I assume, but they can't bring in enough money. So, do they decide to can they even take a smaller cut just to get in?
Yeah, and that's a thing that I've heard a lot of people talk about, just a constant state of flux. And what if Washington and Oregon go to the Big 12 for 6 years, let's say, until the Big 10 deal is up and more money is negotiated, even though we know that there is an escalator clause in the Big 10 media rights deal for certain ads. I mean, granted, Notre Dame is really the one that I think that predicates the additional financial boon, but that there certainly are some things in place there. I just think it would be difficult to be constantly jumping leagues. And I'm not going to put it to the point of, if you're in a hiring position and you get somebody's resume and they're in a new job every 6-7 months, you're like, well, what the hell's wrong with you? Why are you constantly doing this? Now, there is something to be said about upward mobility and moving up, but if you're jumping just to jump, I don't know if I'm necessarily buying into a system of where you're going to go to the effort. And I just saw a super chat coming. We'll get to that in a second. I don't know if you're going to go to the effort of jumping to a league, knowing that it is just a temporary step at that point. But I can't imagine anybody in the Pac-12 wanting to sign any sort of lengthy grant of rights as they look at the ACC. And that's something that we will get into here in a second. Let's jump into Glasswing Butterflies super chat, and then we'll get back to expansion talk. How secure is the Aaron Scott commitment? Is Harbaugh going to keep pursuing? Is Aaron truly sold out as a Buckeye? Thanks. I'll jump in quickly because I was there and I had a chance to talk to Aaron directly. I don't think you commit to then be on flip watch immediately. And I'm not trying to be funny, and I'm not trying to be a smart ass with my comment there. I think generally the safest you are in terms of your commit might probably be in the first 24 hours of it. And we're still there until, another 5 hours if you're watching us live, until we get to like 6:30. And actually the commitment ran a little late because it was a commitment. I think that Harbaugh is going to keep pursuing with Klingscale and everybody else. But I think that I really believe Aaron Scott's firmly in this class. This wasn't I just set this arbitrary date and I'm going to commit for now and just fart around and see what happens. Stranger things have happened. If Ryan Day leaves Ohio State, if Tim Walton leaves Ohio State, additionally, some other things happen, chaos could ensue. But all things being equal, I don't see this being built as any sort of temporary measure.
Well, I also think Michigan, while you might want to keep those irons hot, they need to recruit corners. They don't have any in their class. They've got 26 players committed so far, and none of them are corners. I think they have one safety committed. So they can't continue to waste time trying to get Aaron Scott. Steve Klinkscale, their assistant coach, will continue to, text or whatever, but they better go find some people. And so what they're going to have to do is probably find some developmental guys or some guys that, they've moved guys from receiver to corner in the past. They may have to do that again. And what ends up happening for them is they got to sign some guys that are in like the top 400s and 500s, 3-star guys, and hope that they have the tools that they can develop. And Michigan has done a fair job of developing, but they don't always do that well at corner. They've DJ name forget slips me, but he was a starter last year. He played well. Will Johnson, what's that? DJ Turner. Yeah, and he was a developmental guy. Although he was a 4-star guy. Will Johnson, a 5-star guy. But you look at other 3-star guys that they've had, it hasn't been very successful for them. So they can't keep reaching. And they tried, and they thought they had a great shot, and they did have a good shot at Aaron Scott. But I don't think you can continue to waste time. You can spend some time, just don't waste it.
Well, that's the thing. And just to kind of echo what Tony was saying there, I mean, you can put time in trying to get him, but if you have a number of, let's say you need to take 4 corners in a class, you can't sit there and take 3 and then hold a spot for Aaron Scott. You have to take 4, and then if Aaron makes a 11th hour decision and in the closing moments before early signing period that he wants in, you just make it work at that point. I mean, you can't drag. And I know that there are very few people in this chat, though we do get some Michigan fans here. We know that here. There are not a lot of people that are hoping that Michigan has a successful recruiting effort, but you have to sit there and fill those slots and fill those needs. And I'm sure that even though Michigan was a co-favorite all along, that they had to have a plan B ready, because it's not a case of that they're regularly coming into Ohio and beating Ohio State for Ohio kids. That's just not where we've been as of late. It's been a minute.
Maybe that Michigan arrogance had them completely confident, though.
Well, you never know. I mean, again, soon we'll talk a little bit more about Michigan. I promise. That's coming later in the show. Super chat from Ryan Dawes. Is the Big 12 worth salvaging? Will it be a conference that can compete higher than spot 6 in a 12-team playoff? I think that they can be higher than spot 6, because let's remember the first 6 spots are going to league champions. So if the Pac-12 goes away, if the ACC changes what it looks like, which is kind of getting into what we'll be talking about here in a few minutes, could the Big 12 be the tallest of the remainders? Could the Big 12 be 3? Could it be whether or not you believe it's SEC Big 10 or Big 10 SEC? Is the Big 12 in that next spot? And then that the next 3 spots, under the current situation, under the current guidelines, if we lose a Power 5 league, does it rip up the charter, and do they have to kind of change how they're doing these things, or do 2 Group of 5 conferences get themselves in, or how does that work out? But right now it feels like the Big 12 has the desire to survive. It has got the self-preservation mindset of we're expanding, we're trying to dig in a little bit deeper and get there. Now, I don't have the Big 12 necessarily ahead of the ACC at this point, but if we do see defections of the ACC some way, somehow, how does the hierarchy work then?
Yeah, I think it's almost a battle of attrition. If you can just stay standing and not have other conferences come and poach you. And I guess the good thing for the Big 12 is there's not a ton of desirability from a Big 10 or SEC perspective, whereas there is in the ACC. So like the Big 10 and the SEC aren't really worried, aren't thinking about tearing down the Big 12, but they sure might be thinking about tearing down the ACC. So that's something to keep in mind. But with the Big 12, I mean, shoot, we saw a Big 12 team make it to the college football championship game this past year. Now it was only a 4-team playoff. Now, granted, the Big 12 team isn't going to be fortunate enough to play Michigan every year in the finals, probably, or in the playoffs at some point. So they're not going to get that assured win. But if the Big 12 can do it, and if TCU can do it, then anybody in that Big 12, in theory, could do it. And so I think I think they're going to be okay, not great, but at this point, there's going to be two conferences that are doing great, and that's the Big 10 and the SEC. Everybody else just has to hope they're doing okay. And if you're doing okay, you're doing pretty good.
Another super chat, and then we will get into the ACC. And this is going to be a super chat that we're going to address now and talk about a little bit later. Super chat from Jordan Kapler. Could you guys get me in contact with the catering service that did the Team Up North barbecue? I'd like to hire them for Kevin's going away party. Well, I'm unaware that I'm going anywhere, and if I am, please let me know now before I sign a second mortgage or anything else, because
Surprise.
I'll just move into my washing machine box before that, if that's going to be the case. But catering at the Michigan barbecue is a topic we want to talk about, but we also know that once we start talking about food, it all goes downhill from there quickly. So, Jordan, I promise we will get back to this one quickly. You don't even have to kick in another super chat, but if you want to remind us, that works too.
I will answer the question.
Okay.
The catering service was almost assuredly the Ann Arbor High School, which is right across the street. So
Pioneer.
I think they just went to Pioneer. They just went to Pioneer, went to the cafeteria there, and got them some chicken tenders.
Well, there you go. I mean, it was something, and we will talk about it here. Another super chat. We will eventually get to talking about some of these other things, but we love the super chats. It is the way to get yourself to the top of the line. Even King Bronco has figured that one out through the years. We got one from Mike Smith. Two-part question. Does Notre Dame fall into the same contract obligations as the ACC like Clemson and FSU? I know that's one of the hangups. Also, FSU is not an AAU school. Does Syracuse make more sense? Well, let me kind of jump in here by saying we've read a lot of interesting rumors here as of the last couple of days about Florida State and Clemson potentially bolting for the Big Ten, even though those are two schools that I've always figured would end up in the SEC. I felt that Ohio State has been much more bullish on Georgia Tech, UNC, to get that Atlanta market, and certainly under Jim Delaney, who was a student athlete at UNC, and that had always kind of been a big issue there. Now, to Mike's first question, Notre Dame doesn't fall under the same obligations because its football is not necessarily part of the ACC. All other sports other than men's hockey, which is Big Ten, fall under ACC, and they play an ACC schedule, but football does not. Yet, if Notre Dame were to pull out of the ACC, there is a belief kind of built upon statements by the president at Louisville that if 8 teams tried to fold the ACC, that could dissolve the conference. Now, we know that plenty of lawyers on both sides have looked at everything, looked this up, down, left, right, backwards, forwards, top to bottom, and there doesn't seem to be a consensus on what it would take to remove any sort of binding obligations to an Atlantic Coast Conference. If it's 7 teams, if it's 8 teams, if it's 14 teams, what would it take there? And I'm gonna duck out on this one and let Tony jump in before I get to part 2.
Yeah, the Notre Dame thing, I was just looking because I knew there's something that they are tied to the ACC. What I saw was it was $100 million exit fee, but no grant of rights would be involved. So they would just have to pay like $100 million to get out, which they'd be able to make from, and that's only if they were to join another conference. And if they were to join the Big Ten, they'd make that back in 2 years basically, and be just fine. But I'm so interested that there's so much talk about this, and when we know the grant of rights goes until 2036, and how do you get out of that, and all of these lawyers, there must be reasons why you keep hearing this. And obviously those 7 or 8 schools went and talked about how to right themselves and can they get out of this. And even if there isn't a there, Like, is it such a poison pill to pay the exit fee and give up the grant of rights, which is basically just 7 home games a year that you could conceivably make back from the Big Ten or the SEC? There's a lot of math involved, and of course, I am not that good at math. I just wonder if if all of the lawyers say no, you can't do it, but you still, well, we're going to do it anyway because we'll either be able to afford the costs, or while we're trying to pay the costs on an annual basis, continue to try to get out of the contract with some lawyers and some goodwill and some PR and things like that. Because I posted this on Buckeye Huddle message board. If Florida State says we're leaving, we want out of the ACC, then they can complain and try to get into the good wishes of the public by saying we're just trying to help our student athletes, we're trying to help our students, and the ACC is keeping us from being able to do that. We can do so much more somewhere else to help our students, our 18 to 22-year-olds, and this giant ogre of the ACC, which makes more money than anybody needs, won't allow us to do that. And they're keeping us, so there are ways you could paint this in a light that maybe puts some pressure on the ACC. But there's just so much, and once somebody leaves, you wonder, like Colorado leaving the Pac-12. You remember in Die Hard 2 when all of the runway lights are out and the one plane crashes, and that's how the other planes are able to land because they see the light of the fire. Like, once one team lights that fire, then is that a signal for all of the other teams? Like, we can land here too.
So who are you sending first to sit there and be the sacrificial lamb at that point? Then who's got to light up the runway?
Dr. Falcon.
There you go. Back to Mike's point, because he has several points in this super chat. Also, FSU is not an AAU school, and Florida State just kind of got kneecapped in the recent situation with the AAU. Not only did FSU not get in, who was it that got in? It was like USF, South Florida got in. So it's like, no, we're still not going to let you in, but we're going to let your little brother over there in. So I don't know if we necessarily need to look at expansion exactly the way that we did even 2 or 3 years ago. Are we still beholden upon, you have to bring AAU membership, you have to bring TV markets, you have to bring all of this, or are we going a complete 180 from when I was saying expansion isn't about just football, it's about so much more? I mean, where is the genesis of this? Where does it come from?
Well, it comes from money. That's everything. I do, with the fact that Florida State is trying to get into the AAU is interesting to me. And I don't know if you can try every year. I'm not sure what the cutoff is, but the simple fact that they're trying tells me that they will continue to try. Of course, we know Nebraska is not part of the AAU any longer. They were when they joined the Big Ten. I believe they're also trying to get back into it. But as I continue to say, Notre Dame is not part of the AAU, and the Big Ten would take them tomorrow. So they will make some. They will accept some differences, So if Notre Dame, they're not in the AAU and they want in the Big Ten would waive their, the gentleman's agreement about AAU schools. And is Florida State, which is obviously a known football entity, but also a brand new footprint for the Big Ten, is that enough for them to also waive their gentleman's agreement about AAU, with the wink and the nod that Florida State's trying to get there? They're studying up, and they're trying to get there. And so is there enough goodwill and good intentions there for the Big Ten to say, yes, we can, this money deal is a good deal. And plus, we're still trying to do the book learning. Don't worry, we're still trying.
Because the thing is like, if you just look at television homes in Tallahassee, that's a craptacular market. It is not a great TV market. But in some ways, Florida is similar to Ohio, where there are a lot of markets. So your market number is really downgraded because you're up against this market and that market. And and Tallahassee, the Tampa market and the Orlando market cut into some of the range that it may have. And, is there a Pensacola market? I do believe there is. So you're kind of landlocked in there to where you don't have a ton of households to get to. So you can't do that. But when you look at having a program in the state of Florida where, the ACC still has Miami, and we're playing in the hypothetical of the FSU talk here, and I mean, and obviously the SEC has the University of Florida, and the Big 12 has UCF. It's somewhere that you would want to have a foothold, but at what cost? And I'll jump into the last thing with Mike Smith asking, does Syracuse make more sense? You already have New York City, and I understand Syracuse is upstate and it's a different market and everything else. I don't know necessarily what Syracuse brings you. It doesn't bring you anything in terms of prestige. Now, if you're in sports broadcasting, the Newhouse School of Public Communications, somewhere that I significantly looked at when I was looking at colleges, means something. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on at Syracuse, but there's not a great current tradition going on right now as Boeheim's basketball team was starting to fade. And, God bless Dino Babers for everything he's trying to do with football, but at least on first glance, I'm not seeing much value out of Syracuse. I mean, hell, I would take NC State before I would take Syracuse.
Yeah, and real quickly, Notre Dame did get into the AAU this summer with that big bunch of people trying to get in, schools trying to get in. But previously, Ohio State or the Big Ten would have definitely taken them without that. But with Syracuse, maybe that broadcast school and the football program can replace Northwestern. Should Northwestern want to get away from big sports and just go back to being an academic institution, then maybe. But still, no. I think. And I would say I like Pitt better than Syracuse, but you don't need Pitt because you've got Penn State. So this is where if you're going to branch off, I know North Carolina has always been ever since like Jim Delaney back because he went to North Carolina, attended North Carolina. I don't really care for the idea of Virginia. Virginia does absolutely nothing for me. I just view them as entirely as their basketball program, which is just awful to watch and not appealing in any sort. North Carolina has some appeal. Duke really does nothing for me. I would love to see Clemson and Florida State or Miami join the Big Ten, but I don't. What is the footprint? What is the appeal of Clemson other than the football program? Like, is there enough TV there to, there's interest, but are there eyeballs?
Exactly. And that's the thing. I like the idea of UNC. I mean, not only do you obviously get the Raleigh-Durham market because that's right there, but you also pick up Charlotte. I think we see population trends getting to the point of where a lot of families that would normally live in the Rust Belt have moved to North Carolina. So you're getting some more fertile recruiting grounds that are within your conference. So, I mean, I could make a lot of arguments there. I agree. UVA is an academic play. I mean, obviously the academics at UVA are fantastic. Again, maybe somebody who steps in if Northwestern goes the way of University of Chicago and goes more to the emeritus role, and that's where that stands. But let's kind of talk about the rumors out there, and I want to predicate it by saying I read most of the recruiting people on Twitter. Some of the guys I agree with, some of them I don't agree with, some of them I never agree with. There are some good ones out there. There's some that I'm not so sure about. I talked to a couple of them kind of behind the scenes just because I like to know what it is that they're thinking. And, they know that I'm not going to sit there and take their information and go and post it as my own. I generally don't want to stick my neck out there and have my head chopped off because I run wild. But over the course of the last couple of days, there's been a lot of talk about Florida State and maybe a lesser extent about Clemson and some sort of rumored Wednesday announcement by Florida State. And apparently, and I don't belong to other sites, I belong to Buckeye Huddle, as should you. So check us out at buckeyehuddle.com. Apparently, some mods on some those who are not message board savvy moderators who are on these sites are lending some credence to these rumors. And it really seems as if Florida State is kind of the ringleader, and whether or not, we don't know what Clemson's pain tolerance is at this point. But according to the rumors, if you believe the rumors, and again, these are all rumors. I mean, it's rumors until it's reality. Nobody saw Texas and Oklahoma coming. I mean, that was kept under wraps very well. USC and UCLA, I had 8 minutes of notice. 8 minutes of notice. I got a text message from somebody. I think I just finished messaging Tom and Tony and Mark and said, I think something's happening, and the story was out. But when you look at the Florida State, the rumor is that they have figured out a way to negotiate the exit fee to $300 million, $30 million a year over the course of 10 years, with the belief that that's only going to eat into half of what their payout would be. I mean, obviously, if you're going to get somebody like Florida State, you're not bringing them in on a half share. You've got to bring them in on a full share. You've got to find a way to negotiate the deal to where you're able to do that, because it doesn't make any sense for Florida State to come in at $30 million a year, only, if you believe the rumors, to have to turn around and sign that check over to the ACC, the big bad ogre of the ACC, as Tony put it. And then again, Clemson has been mentioned as well as being kind of in that mix. But to Tony's point, once you let the genie out of the bottle, if Florida State kicks down that door, breaks the lock, opens the top, whatever the hell you want to say there, what's holding anybody else back?
Well, I guess the 300 million, maybe, because how many programs can, one, afford it, two, justify it? I don't know that anybody can justify it. I guess it depends on how quickly you are made whole. But yeah, I mean, it's something that Florida State could probably do. And if the rumors are correct, I mean, we keep talking about it, but 300 million, it sounds so stupid to say, 300 million over 10 years is not that much. $30 million a year for when right now Big Ten teams are going to be making somewhere between like 70 and $100 million a year from the TV revenue and the bowls and the playoffs and all of that. So, if you're going to say 75 million and you're going to take 30 million out of that and make, to pay your annual debt, and you're still there with 45, that's more than they'll be making in the ACC, because this past year, I think teams made somewhere between like 35 and $41 million from the TV revenue for the ACC. And Florida State could conceivably do that while still giving the ACC $30 million a year. And then you wonder, for the ACC, is that something that is that agreeable to them? Because that's new revenue. One, it's fewer mouths to feed, and it's basically revenue for the entire life, the rest of the life of the grant of rights. So does that make everybody else a little bit happier? I'm sure Syracuse will take it. Pat Narduzzi will love the extra money, and the coaches will love it, because not only will it be extra money, they won't have to then play Florida State. And right now it looks like Florida State is on the uptick, which means that you want to play them even less, certainly less than you did before. I don't know if this is all real. And, maybe we'll find out on Wednesday, and I would be surprised if we do, but I don't doubt the reporting. And when I say reporting, like you said, it's publishers, it's writers, it's mods who are saying, hey, this is what we're hearing. So as somebody, well, I can't say everybody, when we hear stuff like that, we put it on the board. We're not making it up. Now, I can't say that for everybody. I feel pretty confident that the folks at Florida State at these sites aren't making it up. So where are they hearing it from? And then the other thing is, it may all be 100% accurate, but it may also get snuffed out before it ever goes anywhere. And then it looks like, oh, you're just making stuff up. It's like, well, things change.
Well, and let's look to that. You're right. ACC networks, ACC as a conference is in bed with ESPN. ESPN is kind of hemorrhaging money It has let a lot of its talent go. It is not in heavily in the negotiations for any other media rights at this point. I'm looking at you, Pac-12. What if there was a situation of where ESPN leaned on the ACC a little bit and it's like, let's restructure. Let's, all right, maybe we have to break a couple of eggs to make this omelet, but let's restructure. Let's pull in some revenue, some punitive money from these programs that want to depart, and then redo this deal. I mean, I don't see any way that this grant of rights stays intact as is with its current membership to 2036. I mean, it's great for ESPN in the long run. They're paying them a pittance of what everybody else is out there getting. But I mean, this stuff could end up getting jammed up in court and everything else. And I mean, if I'm the ACC, I'm also looking at this in a lot of ways of being like, well, a bunch of my member institutions want to bolt. We're getting robbed in terms of what it is that we're getting financially from everything, and we're kind of becoming a little bit of a laughing stock of being a conference that stupidly just agreed to the terms of service without reading them, like on an iPhone. Oh, you don't know what happens. And for those of you who watch South Park, I'm talking about the human centipede episode or whatever. I mean, you better read those terms of service, or you're going to end up with a butt in your face. I don't know. I mean, it's not going to be good. So a lot of stuff to think about there.
I wonder with the ACC, the ESPN being still like 12 years, 13 years out or whatever, with as volatile as things are with ESPN and Disney, would they be willing to restructure and shorten this thing? Because they don't know what it's going to look like in 7 years. They may not want to have anything to do with this. So would it behoove them to shorten it and pay more annually, but save some money because you don't necessarily know what things are going to be looking like in 7 years, and then you've kind of set yourself up to maybe get back in negotiation with Big Ten, because you once that ACC contract ends, like if you were to restructure it so that ends the same time the Big Ten's contracts end, now you've put yourself in a position to attempt to go after the Big Ten, assuming they even want to afford it at that point. So I think I'm with you. It's not going to last till 2036. It's just a matter of how messy does ESPN want to make it. And it's pretty crazy that a network is basically holding a conference hostage, but this is what they wanted. This is what the conference wanted, because they signed it all up because they had no foresight. They were just concerned about making sure the early money was there, and really just, like I said, a complete lack of foresight on their part as to what the landscape would eventually look like. And there were no futurists in the ACC at that time.
The expansion talk, we're gonna take a 20 on that. We're gonna get to a super chat from Mike Palmer. It seems the Bears finally gotten Justin Fields some help, and his chemistry with DJ Moore looks very promising. Do you feel Justin still has a big ceiling in the NFL? I'm going to turn this one directly over to our resident Bears expert and fan, Tony Gerdeman, and then I will jump in to correct any mistakes that he makes.
Justin Fields is an incredible runner, and he has had no help at receiver and very little help at the offensive line. And so he has gotten this rap that he can't throw, or he's not an accurate thrower. He's the best quarterback in Ohio State football history. He was a 70% completion guy. He was accurate as all heck. He was under control. All of the tangibles, intangibles, he had all of that. So I don't understand why he won't be a success in the NFL. Now, Bears quarterbacks have a history of not being all that successful, but he's by far the most talented quarterback they've ever had in terms of overall abilities, strongest arm, best legs, things like that, the tangible aspect of it. I just I hope the receivers are doing what they should be doing, and the offensive line I think is good and young and getting better. So I really like the way things are going for him. I do expect him to be very good, and I will be disappointed if he isn't, not just because I'm a Bears fan, but it's like, well, why aren't you successful in the NFL? Because you sure looked like nothing was going to stop you in college. And I think the only thing that has stopped him at this point has been the Bears themselves. And so I do expect him to be just fine.
Yeah, the way I kind of look at it is he has had to go out there and figure out in a lot of ways how to move the ball himself for the lack of assistance that he's had, whether it's been in front of him on the line, having to run for his life, maybe some of the lack of talent around him in the receiver core. They've gone out and had to try and make some splashes. Whether or not they've worked, I don't know. But I think DJ Moore is a big step in the right direction. I think that the thing is like the NFL is a talent and opportunity type of situation. You have to have the talent or it doesn't matter, but you also have to have the opportunity too. And you can't control who it is that they necessarily put around you. I mean, I guess at some point when you get to the top of the top, you have the GM's ear over some things, but the Bear, Brett screwed Brett. I mean, we have to find a way that the Bears stop screwing the Bears and they give Justin Fields the weapons he needs. Now, if Justin goes out there and has these things and isn't able to cut the mustard, then it is what it is at that point. But I don't think we know what Justin Fields, the NFL quarterback, is based on what he has had around him, because it's not been a full 11 NFL guys on the offense effort.
I will say I saw where Darnell Wright, their first round draft pick, probably a right tackle, talked about how he accidentally was doing the wide receivers conditioning tests because he read something wrong. So that is what he had been preparing himself for, like the conditioning that all of the players and the position players have to do. He was actually getting himself in shape doing the receivers test. So I guess he passed the offensive line test with flying colors. So that's a very promising little thing there for the Bears offensive line.
Maybe they need to get the offensive line doing some stuff more like the receivers then, or whatever. I mean, I think they probably all catch about the same, but that's just me. But let's get back to again. Thank you for the super chat, Mike. I love talking about any topic really here on the Big Me Kickoff or anything here on youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. If you're catching us on YouTube, on the Buckeye Huddle Facebook page, or if you're listening via podcast on any of your favorite outlets there. But let's get back into some of our starred comments about expansion, and then we will. Mika Hanna, I've seen your questions about Nigel Glover. We'll talk a little recruiting, and then we'll get into our last topic. But Mike Smith here says, I think it's a long shot for Clemson and FSU given the contract and the AAU situations. We kind of talked on that. I don't think the AAU situation is as much of a deal. And I think that the contract being the grant of rights, that's a you problem. If you figure that out, we will be here to listen to you. So if Florida State has figured out the secret sauce in terms of $30 million a year for 10 years or $1 million a year for 300 years or whatever it is that they agree to do.
Bobby Bonilla.
Yes. Then it's on Tony Petitti and the Big Ten chancellors and presidents to make a decision. I think it's funny that we talked to Tony Petitti last week in Indianapolis, and we get the boilerplate. We're just focused on integrating USC and UCLA or whatever, and then the Colorado news comes out hours after the official news comes out hours after that. And I did see an interview of where he didn't necessarily change his stance, but I would be really surprised if he came out and did a 180 and said, oh, the Big Ten's open for business. That's just never really been the MO for this conference.
Yeah, and the SEC is saying the same thing. Like we're good where we are, that sort of thing. And that's how lying works, everybody. That's how you lie. You say stuff that you're actually doing the opposite of behind closed doors.
I'm going to jump off of our main topic to get to a Jeremiah Yoder question that I had starred here. Hey, guys, question for you both. If this were Star Wars, which one of you is Han Solo and which one is Chewbacca? I would say normally I'm the biggest smartass, but next to Tony, I'm not. So, I sadly may have to give Tony the Han Solo designation, and I may have to be Chewbacca, even though as you can tell, I'm a little follically challenged, and that's an issue. But I don't know,
Chewbacca's
Tony.
also smart ass.
I don't speak Wookiee.
How about this? One of us is Han, one of us is Lando.
Okay. I have to think on that one there. I need to learn how to play Sabat. But, if I could figure all of that out, we'd get there. Now we're really nerding out. I'm watching our numbers drop. So maybe we'll move off of the Star Wars here to Billy Tuesday. Big Ten still high on Notre Dame joining? Absolutely. Absolutely. And you got to wonder where, we've talked about a lot of different pieces, but let's get into the Notre Dame side of things as I get out here. And I see Mike Smith with a super chat. We'll get to that here in a minute. Jack Swarbrick is stepping down here. I mean, at the end of this season, something like that. I don't have the date in front of me. They're bringing in an NBC television executive to be their new AD. I don't know much, but I know that means something. Now, I think that in a lot of ways, if you bring in new blood at that point to make major changes. And I think they're getting to a point of where you're still going to have this generation of donor who is going to have a major issue with a major issue with joining a conference. Our independence means everything. We're the only truly national program, blah, 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 whatever the hell. But you're also getting to a point where we haven't heard any NBC re-up numbers or deal or anything at this point. We don't know where that's going to stand. And I know that there's this belief that Notre Dame fans think that they're going to get $50 to $75 million a year standalone. Well, I'm here to tell you that I'm highly skeptical of that. The ratings numbers don't bear that out. That's just not the case. I think that NBC certainly would like to get more Big Ten inventory at some point. I think that once CBS and NBC get a taste of Big Ten ratings and everything else, it's only going to help the Big Ten the next time that they come to the table here in whatever it is, 6 or 7 years. But Notre Dame is still a linchpin. Notre Dame is really the only program, in my knowledge, that in the media rights deal is named by name of a non-conference school that has its own stipend and caveat on there. So unless I'm largely mistaken, Billy, the Big Ten is still very high on that.
Well, and they make like what, $25 million a year from NBC, and they want 3 times that moving forward. Could they get there if they do the ACC agreement with the Big Ten, where they will play 5 Big Ten teams? Does that make them more agreeable, NBC more agreeable then, to where it's almost essentially a package deal, and you can find a way to make that money work? I don't think they're going to get 75, but where would they be happy, and where is enough to where they don't need to join a conference, and what is the point to where we won't join the conference, but we'll do the 5 games against the Big Ten like we do with the ACC, although I'm not sure how long that deal with the ACC lasts for Notre Dame.
Yeah, could an imminent destruction of the ACC force Notre Dame's hand? Because, oh, great, you get to play 5 ACC teams, and you're playing Boston College twice, Virginia Tech once, and NC State twice. I mean, is that going to be there? I don't think the product is necessarily worth it. And I think that the Big Ten has to say it's all or nothing. It's all or nothing. And I've said this before. Notre Dame gets one more invite to the Big Ten, and you pick out when, and it's thumbs up or thumbs down. And if it's thumbs down, we're done with you. We are going to instruct our member institutions to stop scheduling you. Why are you going to give them preferential treatment within their own footprint to play against your programs when they're not going to come on board? At some point, we hear all this stuff about presidents and chancellors doing stuff that maybe is not in the best interest of their own school, but is in the best interest of their own conference. This would be in the best interest of the conference if they could sit there and say it's thumbs up or thumbs down, because we're sick and tired of sitting on the pot. Something has to move. Roast.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I wasn't listening. I tuned it out once you started saying stuff like that. But um, I don't know the numbers last year, but back in 2021, the only games where Notre Dame had ratings that were better than Big Ten games were the first week of the season when they played on a Sunday and had no competition, and the other was when they played Wisconsin. So it's like they even needed the Big Ten to outrate a Big Ten game. Other than that, they're usually third or fourth behind. Like they're usually 2, 3, 4 Big Ten teams ahead of them in the ratings, and that's even with the being on NBC because a lot of those games aren't all that great. Surprised people aren't necessarily caring about Notre Dame and Stanford. So it's not worth $75 million. Now, is it worth $75 million to have Notre Dame and a little boost for the lead into the Big Ten that you have paid a lot for? I think it's still not 75, but is it 60 million so that you're there's a little bit of a hook there to keep people from their 2:30 or 3:30 slot to the 7:30, where you're just trying to keep as many people there as possible? Is there some just is it worth it that way so that people aren't coming in cold at 7:30 watching the 3:30 CBS game, to keep all of the eyeballs on your network from say 2:30 until midnight or whatever?
Well, and it creates more gooder inventory, to use
Yeah.
bad English there. I mean, because all right, you're not getting the first pick. It's going to Fox this week, and you're not getting the second pick because it's going to CBS this week. But if you have Notre Dame versus most teams in this 16, 18, 20, 22, whatever team Big Ten, and Notre Dame's in them, that I think that's going to help because that's still going to outpace some of your donkey games out there. So there's going to be a benefit in there for everybody. But if you end up having a situation of where NBC is able to, get a second game out of it moving forward, and then at that point, CBS is going to be free and clear of its SEC contractual obligations, which only runs through this year. I think that there is a lot of money that can still be out there, and I am not 100% convinced that the 24 schedule that we were given with, we don't have dates, but the teams, I'm not 100% convinced that is going to be the schedule that is played in 24. I'm not.
I'm with you. Completely agree, because they can change it at any point.
Right. I mean, nothing's in there. They don't have any dates in there, so none of y'all have any hotel rooms. I mean, the only thing we know is that unless Ryan Day gets his way with this conversation, Ohio State, Michigan is going to be the last Saturday of the season. And you got to assume that's, once you go to, hell, do we even know the dates of the 12-team playoff? Do we know? I mean, I was under the impression at some point that everything was going to move up a week and that 0 week was going to be week 1, and that the championship week might be in November and not in December. So I don't even know then. So I can't even say start booking your rooms in Columbus for Ohio State, Michigan 24. So we don't know anything. We don't know any of this stuff. Mike Smith super chat, and we will get to all of this here a little bit. We're already at 53 minutes on the show. You see, it's great coming into these things with nothing prepared. So we're not burning anything. Can we talk about expectations of food if you're having a barbecue? Absolutely. Going along with Jordan Kapler, all of that will be there. We will talk about that, whether that's in 5 minutes of the top of the hour. We got several recruiting questions I want to get to, and I'm sure we're going to have some more stuff to talk about here in terms of conference realignment and things. I lost the comment, but back to the Star Wars stuff. Somebody said that Tom is C-3PO, and I can see that. So let's get back into stuff. And if
emotionless,
yes,
speaks several languages, English and Australian.
Crikey. Let me go in here. Peace Clan. Anyone talking about an ACC team leaving needs to know that's not going to happen. Grant of rights thing is still very strong, not quite worth it right now. Maybe in 5 years. Again, I want to make sure that I get to some of these questions, even if we kind of touched upon them. There are ways out of these deals. I spoke to a Clemson insider 6-8 months ago, somebody that is very much on top of that beat. And I know that very real conversations were going on there about trying to figure out how to get out of this grant of rights. I know that we've seen copies of it online, and everybody wants to talk about how ironclad it is. Nothing is truly as ironclad as we believe it is, or none of us would ever get out of our timeshares in perpetuity. But on top of that, too, maybe the ACC or ESPN or a combination of them look to try and reopen things, because the reality is what if you're one of these ACC teams that nobody wants? I'm going to pick on Jeff Hafley's Boston College Eagles at this point. I mean, if it's not the ACC, it's what, the MAC for them or something like that. I don't know where they're going at this point. The American, um, you know, are they happy locked in at their whatever it is, 28 million, whatever? I mean, they're probably not going to get that much out of the MAC, but at some point, do you sit there and say we need to reopen negotiations just for our own survival? I mean, because the reality is that the rich are going to get richer. The rich, I mean, that's just going to happen. And if you don't get in the game, it's like back when playing at the arcade and there was a row of quarters across the Pac-Man machine. If you don't get your quarter in that line, you're never getting on that machine. So there are going to be a lot of teams that are going to be like, this is all going to pass us by, and then we're going to have to sue the ACC for some sort of dereliction of duty.
Well, the thing is, there are schools that are just going to be happily taking that money, but they need to have a plan, and they need to start thinking about that plan, because you want to go ahead and allot the 25 or the $35 million for the next 12 years. What happens if it's not there in 5 years because everything has collapsed in the ACC? What are you going to do then? So you wonder if it wouldn't behoove those programs to, like, okay, this is clearly untenable, so let's make it tenable. Let's go back and finalize a deal with the people who want to be here for a term that is agreeable to everybody, be it the network, be it the conference, because clearly another 12 years isn't going to work. And so at some point it's going to collapse. And with so much money, with so much riding on things and so much planning based on the money that you're going to get, you don't actually know how long you're going to be getting that money, because at some point it's going to go away. So wouldn't you rather know how things are going rather than just continue to, like, whistle past the graveyard, basically, is what everybody is doing at this point in the ACC? Like, I got my money this year, and I've already spent the next 4 years worth of it, and buildings and things like that, but it may not be there for you next year. So how are you going to deal with that? And maybe some proactivity might help.
I mean, how do you compete against the Big Ten doling out? Let's just lowball it and say that after it's all said and done, you're only getting a paltry 70 million a year. Boo-hoo. And whatever it is that the SEC's number is, which I don't really expect to be dramatically far off. I mean, there is going to be some distance just based on where contracts are signed. And then you're making, let's just say 30, and, damn happy to get it. I mean, at some point you're going to fall further and further behind, and you're going to get desperate. You're going to need to figure out how to make a move if you're going to compete, because if there is a $40 million deficit from the top leagues and you over the course of 12 years, talking about $500 million at that point. And I know Tony earlier said $300 million over 10 years isn't that big of a deal. But when we say $500 million, be sure to buy your Mega Millions tickets while you're at it, which is a little over $1 billion. But we talk about $500 million. I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at.
No, and talking the Peace Clan talking about wait 5 years, it becomes a question of, can you afford to wait? And yes, it'll be cheaper in 5 years, but how much income will you have lost out on by staying in the ACC?
All of it. You'll lose out on a lot of it, and you'll lose out on a lot of visibility. I mean, all right, nobody's really clamoring about any of the conference networks. I mean, and I like a lot of the people who work at Big Ten Network. I mean, SEC Network, ACC Network, whatever. But you've got to figure out a way. I mean, this is an arms race, and if you're not if you're not climbing, you're falling. And you're falling if you're just maintaining. So I think that there is going to be there is a necessity for these teams, the giants of the ACC, to try and figure out a way to move. I mean, plain and simple. And I will bring this in, and then we'll kind of switch gears a little to recruiting, and then we'll get to our food segment, and then if we got anything else about this, we'll get back to it. Could this all be cloak and dagger by Florida State and Clemson to try and squeeze the head of the ACC and ESPN to change? I don't think that the ESPN is going to be like, screw it, here's more money. But, maybe a little bit more of a performance-based payout or something. I know that was something that we'd heard talked about in other instances. Is this all some big ploy?
Well, it's definitely a ploy, and whatever outcome happens, they'll do the best with it. But weren't those incentives like maybe like an extra 10 million or so for one or two of the programs, which it's not going to make them whole by any means, but I guess it's something.
All right, we're here at the top of the hour, give or take a minute, or really the bottom of the hour, but we've gone on here for an hour. So, once again, you're watching the Big Me Kickoff. I'm your host, Kevin Noon, joined by Tony Gerdeman. We've spent much of the last hour talking about conference realignment and things of that nature. We're going to move on here a little bit to recruiting here, but if you have more questions about realignment, get them in. I'll keep an eye. Super Chats gets you to the front of the line. Be sure to like the channel, subscribe to the channel, give us that thumbs up. All of that helps us out with the algorithm. If you're watching this on the Book of Faces, why don't you send us some stars? I really still don't understand them, but that just sounds nice. And write us a 5-star review if you're listening on any of your favorite podcasting vehicles. First and foremost, and I've seen questions about Nigel Glover. I've seen some things about Chris Henry Jr. But again, going back to the Aaron Scott news and the ceremony, Tony, I was at the ceremony. What was it like watching it? Because I can certainly give firsthand experience of being there, but you've got more of a shared experience with our viewers who were probably watching it either on his IG feed or our YouTube feed.
Well, and the one thing is I had both his Instagram feed up and I also had your live stream up, and just watching the numbers grow. And at some point there's like, almost 6,000 people on the IG feed. And I know we had a crazy number on our live stream. And so clearly we know he's had fun with this whole thing. And the picking up the Oregon bag and setting that down was no surprise. And then when he picked up the Ohio State bag and set that down, you're thinking, this is exactly what a cornerback would do. This is the kind of attitude that you need out of your cornerback. But still, there's this feeling like until you see Ohio State coming out of the bag or anything like that, because once you put the Michigan hat, like he didn't pick the Michigan hat up, you're kind of thinking, okay, something is suspicious here. And then he pulls that jersey out, and of course, this is, like I said, it's the kind of attitude and swagger you want out of a cornerback. Maybe not a receiver because that's more of a me first thing, but at the corner, it's fine. That kind of attitude. But honestly, as then the smoke starts rolling in, I had a little concern for you and Mark. You're my friends. I didn't know exactly how things were going in there. And then the smoke alarm goes off. And at some point, I was just expecting everybody to start running. And having seen how these things happen, like on Seinfeld, when people you push the older people over to get out, I was worried about you, Kevin.
Well, let me tell you too, I was all the way the furthest point from the door. I would have been a statistic. I'm telling you that right now. +2 with an expensive camera and computer and everything else in there. I'd be like, no, my toys. I can't lose my toys. So I would have been hosed. I saw a little mechanical unit before they got the table set up. I'm like, what is that? Is that like a strobe light or a smoke machine? And then when I saw a family member coming up with this little jug of smoke machine, juice or whatever, I'm like, oh boy, here we go. And it was nice because when they first started, it was just a little bit of the smoke machine, and then it went from a light dusting to Canada wildfire before you knew it. And we couldn't see anything. And like people in the stream were freaking out. It's like, I can't see. And I said, don't worry, I can't either.
Was it smoke or was it fog?
It was a foggish. I mean, it had like
Okay.
that sweet smell of like a smoke machine. It just was weird. But we got there early, and at first, like a family member, it wasn't the mom or the dad. We're like, "Oh, you're here early," even though we were told to get there when we did, and so we figured they were hiding, Brutus Buckeye in there or something, or had like a Buckeye cake out. We didn't know necessarily how it was going to go. And for those who didn't watch it, there was a red, a yellow, and a green backdrop that were all there to signify Ohio State and Oregon and the team up north's colors, or Jamaica. I mean, I was down with either of them, and I'm like, I don't know how this is going to happen. Then when they brought out the bags, I was like, all right, I'm not really sure what's happening here. And then Tony's got a PhD in hat science. And only one of the hats was a bucket hat, really, at first. I mean, like there was an Oregon bucket hat, and then I think it was a Michigan ball cap. I know after the fact that Aaron was wearing an Ohio State bucket hat, but I'm like, what happens if there are multiple types of hats? Does that supersede location, like hat style?
Well, and the first clue was the three bags with the three hats. Michigan was in the middle, and we all know the middle hat curse is one of the most powerful forces in the universe. And so, once you saw that, then you thought things weren't going to go well for Michigan, because bag or hat, there was a hat there. It was in the middle. We know the middle is rarely, never really taken. Generally, only Notre Dame players, Notre Dame commits will take the middle hat, and also players who are committing with live animals, they will also take the middle hat. Other than that, almost like 1% of the hat selection ceremonies will go with the middle. So that's just a little tip for me to you. If you see the hat in the middle, generally they're going away from that.
See, what you need to do is for the next kid that wants to shock the world, you need to come in as a hat consultant and say, look, I've done studies, I've got years of data points here. I'm going to tell you how you're going to shock everybody. And again, I have to give credit to Aaron Scott's mom, who had the idea of putting the jersey in the bag, in the Michigan bag or whatever. I mean, but it was funny because there were, when we pulled up there to the facility of where they were holding this, there was a family member out there, not only in an Ohio State basketball jersey, he had matching shorts too. And then I saw somebody else with Ohio State gear. And then I saw a couple of Michigan hats. And then somebody started playing Buckeye Battle Cry. And I'm like, is that like a precursor? And it's like, oh no, that's just Uncle Sal or somebody outside who's just playing it from his car radio or whatever. And I'm like, well, I'm just here to tell the story. I'm not here to ruin. It's like, no, seriously, that's just from outside. But it was something. And, I'm always so happy covering these events because the amount of elation that you see with these families, because of the amount of time and effort and sacrifice that everybody's had to put into this. Because sure, the athlete has to have talent, the athlete has to have the drive, but the family has to be there to support them too. The 6 a.m. practices, the extra study tables, whatever it may be to get across that finish line. So it truly is a celebration. I know a lot of people are like, I don't like these commitment ceremonies. It's so me first. Well, damn it, it should be me first on that day, I think.
How many days of that do you get? Enjoy it.
Let me
just do it on time.
Just do it on time. Mika Hanna, do we land Nigel Glover? I'll say kind of what I know on that situation is he took his 3 officials, Kentucky, Ohio State, and that team up north. If you're a member of Buckeye Huddle, you'll have read some things that Alex Lightman and Mark Gibler have both posted. Sometimes it all runs together. I don't remember who writes what, but I think Kentucky's numbers are a little bit more convenient for Glover to get in there. If he comes to Ohio State or Michigan, is he an immediately eligible and go at that point, or do you look at somebody who maybe finds an NIL deal to pay his tuition through January to then be eligible for 24? I think that Ohio State certainly has a fantastic shot there. I would have felt better if he would have just committed after the Ohio State visit. I know Ohio State took it seriously. We saw him during his official because that overlapped the summer Sunday extravaganza on Friday. I know that there was a car headed to Hyde Park. So I think that is where Nigel Glover ended up for the dinner. So that's better than going to McDonald's or Cane's or anything like that, or even BD's Mongolian. So they were taking it seriously. And I think Ohio State is all in on this one. I like Ohio State's chances there, but it's different. Even for a kid who was only a couple of months removed from his actual real recruitment, once you've been to the fair and seen the bear, do you approach things differently?
It was interesting because he's not the biggest guy, and he was a tweener in high school and kind of developed, and I think could use another year of that development. And really, for a true freshman linebacker, there's not going to be much opportunity for you this year at Ohio State. But that's pretty standard. I mean, CJ Hicks didn't play last year. Gabe Powers didn't play last year. I don't know how Michigan, as far as I know, they were still over still like 10 players over the scholarship back in like June. And so I don't know how close they are to getting over or getting under. At this point, who even has room. But I know Ohio State, really it's a semester if you wanted to, walk on a gray shirt or whatever it is, and then they'll find room for you in January. But do they want to do that? Does a player want to do that when they don't have to? It's just a matter of, do you want to be at Ohio State more than you want to not have to deal with the situation that you're in? But I don't know. I don't have anything on him. I know you guys do. You and Mark and Alex have more on him. I think they could use him because they missed out on a linebacker here in this class in the 2024 class. So you kind of got to bounce those numbers back up. Even though you only use 2 linebackers, they're going to be losing some here, quite a few actually in the next year or two.
If you're watching along, be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that bell, and give us a thumbs up while you're at it. If you're watching us on Facebook, go ahead and give us a thumbs up or an emoji there, just so we know that you're out there. I'll give you 3 seconds to hit all of those buttons here in 3, 2, 1. Smash that button for us. Thank you. Odysseus, chances that we flip Marquise Lightfoot now with the Miami booster scandal. Yeah, that Life Wallet John Ruiz situation certainly is something there. I was reading some Miami posts on a board, and they're trying to say that John Ruiz is not their main booster, and their NIL is much larger than Ruiz and Lightfoot, than Ruiz and Life Wallet, is what I meant to say. And
Wallet.
I think even without all of that situation, for those who don't know the situation, the values of the shares have come down, and there's some sort of federal investigation going on. It just seems like the whole Life Wallet situation is in a bad spot. Now, a lot of people feel that Lightfoot picked Miami over Ohio State because of NIL. I think NIL played a factor there. But for people who say that Ohio State doesn't know how to play NIL, Ohio State played very great NIL in landing Justin Scott, the defensive tackle out of Chicago. So it can't be 6 of one and half a dozen of another. I mean, it's, there's pluses and minuses there, but I've always felt that Ohio State still has a chance of flipping Lightfoot, just because I don't think that Miami is all that good, and especially for a kid out of Chicago. And yeah, it's great. I've been down to Coral Gables, and it's beautiful down there. And at the take away the Fiesta Bowl, and how you may feel about some Miami fans, but University of Miami is a good school. It really is. I mean, but with that being said, I don't know if I see Lightfoot necessarily being a huge fit there. So I think that it may crack the door open a little bit more, but I think Ohio State also has to show some things on the field.
Yeah, I would say anytime somebody picks Miami, I don't see that as a football decision. And so if the football aspect or the non-football aspect of it is a little screwy right now, he might want to reconsider a football decision. And I wouldn't be shocked at all if he ends up back with the Buckeyes.
I don't know if I have one of these starred, but I know somebody was asking about the status of Dylan Stewart and with Edric Houston. Two kids that are in a little bit of different situations. Edric Houston, there was a lot of people that came out strongly and felt that Ohio State was the leader there. As you get closer to a kid's announcement date, I think everything kind of tightens up, including people's emotions, and it has tightened up some. I still like Ohio State there. Question, as I said too, about Dylan Stewart. South Carolina very much a strong contender for the star player out of the Washington D.C. area. I think some of the confidence that people had in Ohio State is starting to wane a little bit. I can't. I mean, I think they land Houston. I don't think they land Stewart. I'm not saying that based on a ton of hard fact, but that is just my gut feeling. And ultimately, that's kind of recruiting coverage. There's a lot of gut feeling, because if you know and you go out a month early and say it, you're just ruining the kid's moment.
Yeah, I'm just reading some of the stuff here, but yeah, I'm with you on Stewart. Anytime South Carolina, a school like South Carolina is in the mix, and you just assume there's something going on there in terms of why they really like something, and it might just be the best fit. And it's an odd school to be competing with all of these others, and so that's kind of where I expect him to end up.
We'll jump into this one. Larry saying that Ohio State also picked up a kicker from Australia. Pro Kick Australia, supplying America with kickers and punters for years and years. And Ohio State has not had bad luck with this program.
No, and it's interesting. I think he's going to have to be a walk-on at this point, because obviously there's no room for him, and Jesse Mirko still has another year of eligibility after this one, unless he goes pro. So are they just? It's just odd that somebody would come and walk on rather than go and get a scholarship, except for the fact that Ohio State is a pipeline with Pro Kick and Cam Johnston doing very well in the NFL, and Jesse Mirko obviously doing well at Ohio State. So maybe it's just a thing where Ohio State is well known, and it's a situation that fits everybody perfectly.
I mean, do you need to kick or punt for 3 years or 4 years, or do you go there and live the college lifestyle for a couple of years and hone in your craft, going from either rugby or Australian rules football or whatever it is that you've done previously to become an American football kicker punter specialist? I mean, we know that based on what we see during practices, you don't have a lot of time to talk, because the kickers and punters kind of go out there and run on their own schedule or whatever. And I say that kind of tongue in cheek, because I've become friends with a couple of dads of specialists, and that's always a conversation we have. And I joke with them, like, well, saw your kid out there doing nothing once again, and it's a good laugh is what's had there. Wingman Ted, do you think Jonte Gilbert decommitted because he might not be a top dog in the backfield? I think it's really hard to hold on to an out-of-state kid, especially in Georgia, Atlanta, for a few years. He committed so early, and I was willing to take the field over Ohio State like 6 ways from Sunday. I just didn't think there would be any way they would be able to hold on to him. Now, of course, people are going to be like, well, what does that mean about Chris Henry Jr.? Chris Henry Jr. is in Ohio, so this is different than Jonte Gilbert being in Atlanta. He wasn't even trying to be sly about the fact he was taking other visits, and I think Ohio State knew all along. And to kind of get into a point that I made with Jim Knowles' younger sister on Twitter, like, talking about, why does this even happen with, do the kids know what committed means? I don't want to put words in their mouth. I don't remember what her post was. It was not indignant or anything. But what I said was, if you tell the kid, no, he can't commit, well, then you've made the decision for them at that point. You've already told them that you're not, we don't want you at this point. Well, you're not going to get another crack at him. So, I mean, the best you can hope for is to hold on to him for dear life and see if that rides. But that was going to be a tough get anyway. And I don't think anything has to do with fear of competition. I think a lot of it just has to do with proximity to these other SEC programs.
Yeah, there's nobody else committed in the 2025 class anyway, so he was competing against nobody, basically.
Well, Tavian St. Clair is.
Well, in terms of the defense, Kevin.
Defense. Well, that's what I thought you meant, but I'm jumping in before somebody else is like, well, Tavian is. Last recruiting question. before we get into our final segment, more than likely, Mika Hanna, we just offered 24 wide receiver Miami commit. What does that mean for Jeremiah McClellan? And I've certainly seen that and everything else. It's a kid out of St. Thomas Aquinas, where Jordan Lyle goes to school, the running back commit, a school that has produced the Bosa brothers, Damon Arnett, others. I mean, it is a powerhouse down there in South Florida to go along with American Heritage and some of these other programs in the Miami-Dade County area. I don't think it means anything, because I think that there was still a scenario of where Ohio State was going to take Jeremiah McClellan and the big receiver out of Maryland, who ended up committing to Florida State. I think there still was a scenario where Ohio State would have taken Jeremiah McClellan and JoJo Trader. I think there's still a scenario of where Ohio State takes McClellan and the name of the kid's escaping me off the top of my head, where they take both of them. At some point something has got to give. You can't take every receiver every year, but if Ohio State's going to continue getting receivers that are top 75 players across the board, all that's going to do is create more competition, and it's going to be on guys like Kojo Antwi and Keon Grays in the class of 22, who have now had a couple years of the program. They're going to have to rise or fail at this point, because Ohio State is going to keep recruiting. But the same thing can be said for the class of Ennis, Tate, Rogers, and then moving forward, you've got to keep going, because Ohio State is going to keep backfilling.
Yeah, Chance Robinson is the commit's name, and I see this more of a reaction to Elijah Moore and JoJo Trader than anything with McClellan at this point. Even though we'll see how that one goes, but they were shooting for 4 in this class anyway. So at some point you gotta move on down your list as guys come off, and hope that you haven't slow played the guys, the fallback plans, if you will. But having a kid at Aquinas, obviously everybody is familiar with him, and he is familiar with Ohio State, so that'll be interesting to watch. It certainly, Miami fans are pretty concerned, I can tell you that.
Right, and they really have no love for Ohio State in the first place, and obviously with Lightfoot, and it's just going to be a case of where they're going to be really, really pissed off with all of that. They already feel like Ohio State has really infringed upon the kids that it is within their destiny to land. One more recruiting question with Mike Smith. Any other options of on the D line? It is a very light class. Well, I think with that being said, Justin Scott is obviously a big deal in there, but missing out on Jaden Jackson certainly hurts. They made a little bit of a run at Dontre Robinson out of Orlando Jones. They're not necessarily in the David Stone chase any bit more, but I think if you get Edric Houston, obviously that is going to be a big deal. If you're able to flip Marquise Lightfoot, that is a big deal. They're still trying to take a swing at Booker Pickett, who is a very light rush in type. I mean, you got to keep going there. I mean, we still have Dylan Stewart listed on Ohio State's board. I don't think that it's a case of where they're going to just magically appear on somebody's list, and we're like, oh, well, we're not talking about Camarion Franklin out of Mississippi, where they don't recruit all that much, but in that he's suddenly going to be on Ohio State's board. I think that it is a case of they've got the names, they kind of know what's going to go there, but Ohio State may have to look at the portal as well. I think Ohio State could look at the portal coming out of this season just to try and fill in some things, but portal recruiting is recruiting. I mean, that's just the world we live in now, and don't look at portal recruiting as oh man, we blew it, now we have to go and get this. I think that you're still got to look at the portal in terms of, especially look at that Jared Verse at Florida State, who was, I don't even remember where he was, somewhere not nearly as good as Florida State. And now he's just tearing it up with the Seminoles. And I knew when he came out and through the portal, I was like, this kid's going to be a beast. He's going to be successful. And, you just have to kind of look at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting to see Ohio State come back around on like Antoine Jackson, Tywan Malone, guys that they recruited in high school, went elsewhere, and they came back to Ohio State. So that's absolutely going to be a place that you still consider and you still look for. And it's probably going to be guys that you're familiar with, but it doesn't have to be. It can be like the Jared Verse guy. Michigan has gotten defensive ends out of the portal that they've had like essentially no contact with before, and that's just part of the process anymore. It's new, but now it's here, it's now, and you can't do one and ignore the other.
All right, let's talk a little Michigan barbecue here, and we will do a lightning round to kind of clear up some last questions before the end of the show. A Michigan target posted a picture this weekend of his plate of food from the Michigan barbecue, and for those who haven't seen it, and I will let Tony corroborate what I said there, it was chicken tenders, mac and cheese, a plain hot dog, and a chocolate chip cookie, and what looked like a glass of lemonade. Now, to further describe it, it was a plain hot dog. The mac and cheese looked okay. The chicken tenders looked like they were 3 or 4 steps below Tyson, and like a Chips Ahoy cookie and maybe Crystal Light. Is that the meal that's going to get you to commit to Jim Harbaugh?
No, and I think there was maybe one grill mark on the hot dog. I don't know if that was an accident because I think that the hot dogs were probably boiled, but it was all. And I watch Top Chef. I know that you need different colors on a plate. I watch The Bear. I know what's going on. I know how to do this stuff. That food was like all the same color, and the chocolate chip cookie looked like a hard cookie. Did not look like a soft cookie.
I don't know. Otis Spunkmeyer, no.
No, and the tenders were absolutely frozen tenders that maybe they threw them in the fryer, but probably just nuked them, or maybe they were in the oven. It was my only hope, and this is the coping that I've seen Michigan fans have as we cope and debate about a plate of food on a recruiting visit.
Is the kid touted as
exactly that it's like, well, maybe he just likes simple foods. Maybe he doesn't like, ribs. And the thing is, like, as I'm watching this and reading it and also thinking about myself, like, these are all foods that are simple. I'm not trying to get messy. I don't want to get it on my shirt. I don't want to get it on my hands. But also these are the foods that a child would eat. And so it would be nice to know, like, what else did you have there? And if this was essentially chicken tenders and hot dogs and mac and cheese, I also wonder if they had crayons for the placemats.
And what about a little packet of applesauce or some Go-Gurt while they were at it? I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you do the Go-Gurt, you don't need spoons or anything like that. The applesauce, you probably need to have spoons or what about spork? I mean, you could have gone spork or something like that. But
although
go ahead.
Might be that might be dangerous. It's got pointy ends. If we're trying to keep things safe and childlike here, I don't know that you go with a spork.
Can you call it a barbecue when you boil the dogs and everything else comes out of the oven? Is that a barbecue? I mean, is that a hoedown? I mean, I don't know what, how you can do that. It's like when people are like, oh, I'm going to sit there and put hot dogs on the grill. I'm barbecuing. No, that's not a barbecue. That is not a barbecue. You are heating up hot dogs on a grill is what you're doing. But I mean, there needs to be something better. I mean, at least during the Brady Hoke era, we saw a picture of Brady Hoke eating real barbecue. So, I mean, is Jim Harbaugh behind Brady Hoke in terms of barbecue knowledge? I mean, what has a staffer been run out of Ann Arbor as fallout to that? And what are the thoughts about the kid who posted, and he was a Detroit kid because I looked at his profile, because this image has had millions of views. Stories have been written about it. I mean, granted, a lot of them are just aggregation sites, but stories have been written.
Well, and I also, I wonder, I hope he turned the notifications off or maybe never had them on, because I don't know if he has responded to anything, but that thing is as viral gets. And like I said, if there's other food there, you have to think like the Michigan recruiting department is like, this guy has sunk us. Like this, we need to put like something out there. We need to like somebody take a picture of the spread that we had and just put it out there to kind of do some damage control. I don't care if you have to make the food right now and make it like, oh, this is what we had yesterday or whatever, or this weekend. Now, of course, if you lie about that, then maybe some recruits will come back and catch you in that lie. But what Stafford did this? I mean, doesn't this look like a Jim Harbaugh meal plan to you?
But a chicken is a nervous bird, so he wouldn't eat the tenders.
He's a steak and milk guy.
The hot dog is probably a nervous rat, so I don't know if he'd eat the hot dogs either. So I don't understand. I will say this: at the Friday recruiting event at Ohio State, I know they had food in there, but I also watched a delivery person bring a lot of boxes of Adriatico's pizza, and that is a hell of a lot more photogenic than the plate of food that we saw. That, as Tony put, was very one tone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel bad for I feel bad for the kid because his social media just blew up, and who knows if it was an accurate representation of the Michigan food situation there. But the story that's all we've seen. So that's the tip of the iceberg. So we assume the rest of the iceberg looks exactly like it.
What if, and to kind of going off of Troy V's comment here, lying is kind of what Michigan does best. What if Jim Harbaugh's out there, just telling people, no, we didn't. You guys had chicken tenders and mac and cheese. No, we didn't. We're going to, it's just, the lies, the lies continue. The lies continue. I don't even know.
They weren't tenders. They weren't chicken tenders. They were chicken fingers.
Well, it's just a bad look. And I talked with a friend who's involved with the Ohio State program, and they were having a good laugh about the images. They just were like, I'm dying reading the comments. They're hilarious. And I went down that rabbit hole for a while and read all of that. But it's, if that is what they do for their biggest recruiting event of the year, that is their biggest recruiting event of the year. This wasn't like something that was slapped together like on Tuesday and they decided to run it on Sunday. It was something that had months in the planning. Just imagine what would happen for something just spur of the moment.
Well, that's almost feels like what it is. Like, what do we have in the freezer? Well, we got chicken tenders, we got some mac and cheese, and we can run to the neighbors to get some hot dogs. And that's basically what they did.
Seriously, they could have called up GFS and got better looking food. Seriously, called up the Schwan's delivery truck or something like that. Or I can understand not wanting to cater from Zingerman's. Zingerman's is very expensive. Even if you have a deal, and we did a hungry huddle from Zingerman's when we were up in Ann Arbor and had a very good meal. For those of you who are unfamiliar with it, it's right there with Katzinger's here in Columbus. It is a true deli, and it was a very good meal. But this was anything but it. So I don't know. But to get back to the earlier things, Jordan Kapler, I do not know who to put you in touch with. I'm just assuming, as Tony said earlier, maybe the lunch lady at Pioneer High School or the junior high school, because that's there. At least give them the square pizzas. I think that would have been better from elementary school. Those,
You know what? I would have no hate for the square pizzas. I would rave about that. You want a rush of commitments from 40-year-old men, you go to the square pizzas.
Those were fantastic. And back to the other super chat that we had too. What are my expectations at a barbecue? I think that burgers and dogs are going to be expected at an event like this. And here is why. Because they're highly customizable and you're not locking somebody into something. If you give them like this big prepared meal or something like that, here's this lasagna. Well, I don't like cheese or whatever. Well, you're not gonna be able to pick the cheese out of lasagna. So you can sit there and have that, but I think you need to have some ribs. I think that maybe some pulled pork. Not everybody has to go for the pulled pork. That's not everybody's thing. But again, it is something that is customizable. You can reuse the buns that you have there to make pulled pork sandwiches to go along with your hot dogs. Yes, the ribs are messy. I get it. You might get some barbecue sauce on, on your good chairs. That's what happens. It's a barbecue. I think you need to have some baked beans. I think that a good mac and cheese with, with like the breadcrumbs on it, the toasted breadcrumbs, I think that's key. I think a good barbecue needs to have like some fruit, like some watermelon and some fruit salad, maybe a dessert, maybe like an icebox lemon cake or a key lime pie, if you will. Then again, we're talking about kids. How about just some cookies that aren't going to tear up the roof of your mouth when you eat them?
Just cookies out of the oven, and that would have been plenty instead of the store bought Kroger brand cookie that they did, and not even the Kroger brand, but like the lower than Kroger brand, which also produces dog food on the side. That's basically where they get those cookies from. But hot dogs, hamburgers, and brats, I think those are you should be able to expect those things, and maybe they had them, maybe they didn't. I didn't see them.
I don't even necessarily mind like the store brand Chips Ahoy knockoff questions or cookies,
Mhm.
but I'm not out there trying to impress people with it. Come on over to our house. We're going to have a fine spread, all the finest meats and cheeses, and these great value cookies. I mean, I'm not. That's just for me. That's just for me, and I don't care. I mean, and just like I just need something a little sweet to get me through the night or whatever, and I'm fine with that. I mean, life's tough out there right now. Things are expensive. I get it, but when you have a recruiting budget, I mean, this isn't something of where they were passing the hat amongst the GAs about, oh, we got to figure out how to pay for this meal or something like that. I think you can go out and, you don't have to get the big K soda. You can go out and get, the name brand soda. And again, like it really looked like it was Crystal Light, or maybe it was just like some lemon Mio or something. And I mean, it just did not look all that appetizing. And I was starving when I looked at that. I skipped breakfast. I was rushing off to do something. My stomach's growling. I'm like, I'm not that hungry.
Imagine the poor kids who were just coming off of a visit where they were given crumble cookies or something like that, and then you move to this kind of cookie. It's just very much a disappointment.
Maybe if Aaron Scott would have said yes, they would have brought out the good food.
Doubt it.
But there you go. As Jason said there, grilling is not a barbecue, and it's not. It's not. And it's one of those terms that is substituted for things that it's not and everything else. It's like, oh, we're having the big barbecue and we're just going to heat up, these ballpark franks or whatever. But I'm not even sure if those were ballpark franks. Let me jump in and look at this. Well, we're getting about to the end, so we'll just do, final thoughts on expansion and conference realignment as we wrap up the show. I know that CP3 Tom is asking for you to go record something with him, Tony. So go ahead and go. I'll wrap up and then we'll call it a show.
See y'all. Thank you for having me, Kevin.
Okay. Well, are those your final thoughts?
No, I will say I'm interested to see if anything happens Wednesday when the rumors, and I don't expect anything to happen Wednesday. However, if stuff starts happening, we're going to be here like every day, basically talking about it, and also trying to cover Ohio State football. Which camp opens on Thursday. We will talk to Ryan Day and the quarterbacks on Wednesday. So we're going to be around regardless.
Yeah, I think Wednesday is going to be a huge line in the sand. I saw somebody posting that they saw that Barstool and Athlon were reporting about 4 teams being pursued by the Big Ten, but I think that those things were kind of aggregation type things. Yeah. So again, I'm not sure, but Wednesday could punch a hole in this and of the Clemson, Florida State rumors. But then again, when you're dealing with message board rumors, somebody will just sign up with a new name or whatever and say, whatever, I don't know, or things just got delayed. I think that there is some smoke in terms of ACC teams desperately want out, but I don't think anybody's found the way out yet. But the good news is that we got a lot of time to go, and if this happens, we will be here all the damn time. So bring your hard cookies and your Crystal Light and your super chat money, and we'll be here talking about all of that good stuff. But I think that's a show right there, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank everybody there for watching us, for Tony Gerdeman, and for the missing T3PO, as Wigman said, and myself, Kevin Noon. You've been watching the Big Me Kickoff. I enjoy that everybody has been here on the show, and we will talk to you all very soon.